Alright, welcome back. It's lesson 38, using properties of equality to solve equations. And your objective is right up here. It says solve one-step equations. Okay, so it just means we're going to take equations that only have one thing we have to do to both sides to solve them. Alright, and your steps are over here. First one says change subtraction to addition, as usual. Step 2 says to isolate the variable using properties of equality. So again, that means we want the variable to get by itself. And step 3 says to write your answer in x equals form. And I almost forgot, I need to add a step 4 here. And that is to answer, let me try that again. Step 4 is to answer the question. Okay, if it's a word problem, you need to make sure you answer the question they asked you. And we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so here's our example. It says, after spending $2.30, Robert had $5.70. How much money did he have before he spent $2.30? And it says, solve this equation to find the answer. So we're trying to find out how much money did he have. So we're saying that how much money he had minus the money he spent equals what he has left now. Okay, so the very first thing I'm going to do, because it's always a good idea, is to rewrite my equation like it looks in my own handwriting. Okay, now step 1 says to change any subtraction to addition if we need to. So we're going to circle the number we're taking away, and we're going to change the whole equation to an addition equation. And we change the circled number to the opposite, in this case the negative version of 2.30. Isolate the variable using the properties of equality. Well, again, we have to think about how do we get rid of negative 230. Well, we're going to add positive 230 to both sides, adding $2.30 to each side. Well, that's going to go ahead and cancel these, because negative 230 plus positive 230 is 0, cancels out. So we get x equals, and we're going to add these numbers together. We get 0 and 10, carry the 1, and 5 plus 1 is 6, plus 2 is 8, and I got to throw my decimal in there. Okay, so now I've got my answer written in x equals form. Now step 4 says answer the question. This only applies to word problems. Okay, so for example, the question here says how much money did he have before he spent $2.30? If I asked you how much money he had, you wouldn't say x equals 8.00. Okay, that's not an answer to the question. That sounds kind of ridiculous. So we need to answer the question now for our final answer. And our final answer should say, how much money did he have? Well, he had $8. Okay, so we answer the question. How much money did he have? He didn't have x equals 8.00. He had $8. So make sure the question is answered when it's a word problem. Alright, let's move on to another example. Okay, it says if a 12-month subscription to a magazine costs $8.40, what is the average cost per month? Use this equation to find the answer. Okay, so again, I'm going to go ahead and just rewrite my equation. And what this equation is telling us is that 12 months times the cost per month should equal $8.40. So a pretty cheap magazine subscription. So this is 12 times m. And we talked about we get rid of times. The opposite of times is divide. So we're going to divide by 12 on both sides. And the 12 divided by 12 gives me 1m equals, and then I need to take $8.40 divided by 12. So I'm going to slide this over a little bit so I can show my work. $8.40 divided by 12. 12 goes into 8 0 times. Put a dot. 12 goes into 84 7 times. And 7 times 12 is 84. Need to make sure I finish the problem out, so I'll bring down a 0 here. And 12 goes into 0 0 times. And 0 times 12 is 0. So I've got nothing left over. So m equals 0.70. That's our answer to the equation. Now we need to answer the question. The question said, what is the average cost per month? So my answer should be 70 cents. Okay? I can write it like that, or 70 cents. Either way. Again, for these word problems, make sure you answer the question at the end, after you solve the equation. Alright, let's keep on moving on. Okay, this example says to solve the equation and to justify the steps. Okay, so justify the steps means to tell me what you did. Okay, so we get a problem like this. Now, let's think about this here. This says, first of all, we're going to rewrite the problem. Okay, 2/3 W equals 3/4. And we justify the steps. That is what's called our given. Okay, that's what we're given in the problem. Now, this says 2/3 times W equals 3/4. Okay, well normally we would divide by the number we're multiplying by. Okay, we would divide by 2/3. But let's think back to fractions. Okay, if I'm going to end up taking 3/4 divided by 2/3, okay, I can't really divide by 2/3. Okay, but that's what I need to do to cancel this out. And the reason I can't divide by 2/3 is because anytime we add a fraction, remember flipping fun, where we change this to multiplication and we flipped this one over. So we're actually going to end up taking 3/4 times the reciprocal of 2/3 times 3/2. So instead of saying we're going to divide by 2/3, anytime we have a fraction, we are going to multiply by its reciprocal, 3/2. So I'm going to take both sides times 3/2. Okay, because 2/3 times 3/2, if I were to write that down, okay, 2/3 times 3/2, well, those cancel and leaves me with just 1, so that's like 1W. So essentially what those do is they cancel each other out. Multiplying by the reciprocal cancels out. So we get W equals, and now we have to take 3/4 times 3/2. Well, since I already started that up here, I'm just going to finish that, okay, in just a second. And for our steps here, we're multiplying by 3/2. Okay, that's what we did. Multiplying by 3/2 to solve this. Okay, so we'll go back up to the top here to show where we had our multiplying by 3/2. And 3/4 times 3/2 equals 9/8. Okay, so our W is equal to 9/8. And that's our answer. Okay, now we can write it as 9/8. We could write it as 1 1/8 if we had to, but we don't need to. That's a perfectly acceptable answer there. So again, anytime that we're using fractions here, okay, when we're taking our fraction and multiplying it by our variable, we can undo that by multiplying by the reciprocal, because that's the same as dividing by the fraction. Have some flippin' fun. Okay? Alright, let's go on to our last example. And we got another one here. Solve the equation and justify the steps. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is rewrite the problem. 1.5 equals x minus 2.3. And again, for our steps, that's called the given. Now, I didn't say this on the last slide, but I'll say it here. Make sure anytime it says to justify your steps, that you are showing your steps over here and writing out what you actually did. Now remember, the first thing that I told you to do in the steps was to change subtraction to addition. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Circling this number. Okay, everything else stays the same. So we get 1.5 equals x. Change the minus to a plus. And this goes to the opposite, negative 2.3. And what we did there was we change subtraction to addition. Okay, now I don't care if you abbreviate subtraction and addition like this, but don't use the symbols plus and minus. Okay, use words. So change subtraction to addition. Okay, make sure you use the words there. Well, now from here we have to get rid of the negative 2.3. We're going to do that by adding a positive 2.3 to both sides. Okay? And in our steps over here, we're going to write add 2.3 to both sides. That's what we're doing. Alright, and when I do that, the negative 2.3 and positive 2.3 will cancel, leave me with just x here. And then we're going to add these numbers. We get 8, and our answer is 3.8 equals x. Okay? Now remember, Mr. Ayers told you that we need to always have x on the left-hand side. So I'm going to take this and just flip it around for my final answer. And that's x equals 3.8. And something you need to know is that the thing that tells me I can do that is called the symmetric property. Okay? So that's the symmetric property. Anytime at the end, when you have to take the x and the number and flip it around, like we did here, that's called the symmetric property. So that's always how you can write that. Okay, we did the symmetric property. And all the symmetric property says is that we can take the whole equation and just flip it around and make a symmetrical or mirror image of it, and it stays the same. Alright, well, that's your lesson here. After 3 days of doing equations, I hope we've got them down pretty well, and best of luck on your homework. Any questions, ask.